I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with your feeder flash for Wednesday, May the 7th, brought to you in part by Performance Livestock Analytics, a livestock technology company that simplifies data and analytics for the livestock industry. And they're concentrating on feeding accuracy, herd health, invoicing, closeouts, staying connected with customers, and customer access to their data, and always improving their product. For more information, go to performancelivestockanalytics.com. Still creeping higher, and we saw bids come up a little bit more from the packers, even though they didn't get much done on Monday. And Kansas ended up selling cattle steady to $2 higher than a week ago, from $2.18 to $2.20, and that's on a Tuesday. The only reason packers are buying cattle on Tuesday is because they're short bought, guys. And they did get a few cattle bought in Kansas on Tuesday. The Northern Plains has yet to blink, and they're going to be wanting more money also. And with $2.24 being their top price last week, and we did hear of some $2.24 bids on top quality cattle on Tuesday, they may be looking as high as $2.27 or even more this week. But market's going to be higher, guys. Will we hit $300 on our index based on an 800-pound steer? We don't know. We keep creeping a little bit closer to that too. We're less than $3 away, and we're getting towards the end of the runs here. So if we don't get it this week, maybe we'll get it next week. But we keep getting a little bit closer all the time. There's been a big dump of managed money on the long side of the cattle futures, and that's helped prop it up here. Of course, we're always susceptible to them pulling the rug out from under it, and we didn't see much gain on Tuesday. Didn't see hardly any gain. It was kind of uneven on your feeder cattle futures, but we're still cranking right along. Wanted to have a little conversation about the money that's being made here in this all-time high market and this big rally that we've been on here for the last several months. Me, myself, of course, I was taught by my father, and he was a trader and ran cattle all his life. And the biggest lesson that he ever taught me when it come to the cattle industry is never buy anything that you don't plan to give a better home to than what it's already had. And I will stand pat on that, and I think most people will agree with me on that. But was having a conversation with a friend of mine on Tuesday, and he was talking about he wasn't buying a lot of cattle when this market kind of took off, and was still trying to stay active in the market, and was just trying to buy anything to keep active while it was going up, and just about everything worked. You couldn't hardly screw up bad enough not to make money when you're buying cattle on this up market. But anything from peewee calves to plain stockers to old thin bred cows, just anything worked. And I was talking, about that with some other people there, and then I kind of learned a lesson from some of my friends in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and that's really saying something if you're going to learn something from those people in the Oklahoma Panhandle, the Robbers Roost, the no man's land up there. But in my experience, and for myself personally, the only impressive money that I ever made was buying plain cattle, plain, poor, thin, thin cattle, upgrading them, getting them to do better than what you thought they were going to do, and then selling them. But I've always had that argument from some of my other friends that I've met in the industry, namely John Hansen. I haven't talked to him for a long time, but he's a friend of mine that feeds the cattle in Iowa. He's a farmer feeder, and he likes to buy the absolute best feeder cattle that he can find anywhere and feed those cattle no matter what they cost, and almost got into an argument with him saying, my gosh, look at all the cheaper cattle that you drive by on the way out to buying those high dollar cattle. And he says the highest cattle that I buy are always end up being the cheapest cattle that I own. But I want to tell you a little story that I learned here recently about buying some better quality cattle. and that was from the Oklahoma Panhandle there, my friends up there around the Beaver County stockyards. But you know, you can buy Okie type cattle and buy them with a pretty fair weigh up condition and a flesh condition on them, and turn them out. And we had a record wheat year. I mean, just a fantastic wheat year. Everybody that had hard red winter wheat this year, I mean, it was one of the few really good years for wheat grazing out there. And those Okie type cattle do pretty good and gain 350 pounds or more on wheat. And anytime you can get a 350 pound gain on steers, whether you got them on wheat or grass or whatever you got them on, that's fantastic. And normally you should be happy with that. But then some other producers that I know from up there that bought single sourced, really high quality northern type cattle up there with a lot of genetics behind them. They buy the same cattle, turn them out on the same, of course it's irrigated wheat, mind you that, but turn them out on the same type wheat, and instead of gaining 350 pounds, they'll gain over 500 pounds. It's just unbelievable what these really top genetic, high quality cattle will do. And when you've done that, then you've really done something. And you've been hearing me talk about them the last few weeks, and they sold some more of them on Tuesday. But it's just, and it kind of surprised me. Not that I didn't know that the top quality, high genetic cattle were better, but to see that type of a return on them, and not in some kind of a university study, but just out there in the real world, it really impresses me. And then it brings me back to why I see the most impressive cattleman that I've ever known, and namely the late Bob Foote, who I watched for almost 20 years every week, and he always tried to buy the best quality cattle he could buy in a mixture, in a formula with really good weigh up condition, namely empty whenever he was buying them, and a good flesh condition, fairly thin. So if you can, and that's why you see the best buyers that are out there and the best cattlemen that are out there trying to buy the best cattle that they can buy with a fair weigh up and a good flesh condition or a thinner flesh condition, because those are the cattle that perform the absolute best. And it just comes back to reconfirm that. But thought that was interesting. I thought that would kind of share that with you guys. But we've had even more rain here in the southern plains. Rained all day on Tuesday in Amarillo. Some more people getting as much as 2 inches of rain there, and it's just unbelievable what a early spring we've had here. And as I go back, looking back to some of the weather forecasts and the Cattle Facts weather forecasts and the long-term weather forecasts from your local weatherman, they weren't calling for this. They never said we were going to get this. So you can't really rely on those kinds of deals. You just have to wait for them and be glad when they get here. But we've had a great spring moisture in the lower Midwest, in the southern plains, and pretty much all through the midsection of the country, with the exception of the extreme northern plains, and they're still fairly dry up there. But let's talk about your board. On Tuesday, June live cattle futures were up just 2 cents at 213.67. August was up 30 cents at 209.37. And your back months on live cattle were unchanged to up 47. And just pure supply and demand won't let that board go down. It just keeps pushing and pushing a little bit higher pretty much every day. May feeder cattle were down 37 cents because it kind of caught up to your CME cash feeder cattle index, which is running behind. It's running about $4 behind your real-time index, but hasn't really got with it this week yet, and seen the big prices we've seen in the sale barns, and still kind of lagging behind with pressure from your directs that get dumped in there, and they're always a lot cheaper and maybe shouldn't even go into that index. But it backed up a little bit because it's just eyeballing that index there at 295.70. August feeder cattle were up 30 cents at 299.20. And if we can't get an index up to $300. We could get that August feeder cattle contract up there, and that is always a big important contract because so many cattle that come off that midsummer and late summer, early fall grass are priced off that August contract, and man, it is getting up there, $299.20. Wow. Your back months on feeder cattle up 27 cents to up 72 cents. July corn was up 1 1/4 cents a bushel at 455 1/2. July beans down 4 1/4 cents a bushel at 1041 1/4. Hard red winter wheat for July up 5 1/4 cents at 538 a bushel. Your fat cattle trade, we haven't seen anything break loose really in the northern plains to speak of at all on a direct basis, and they're just going to dig in, guys, and they're going to make these packers continue to pay while they're behind the 8 ball and they're short bought. They need the product, and we're short of product, and even though they can't seem to get the wholesale box beef cutouts higher, they're still going to have to pay more for cattle if they want to stay in the business and continue to process beef. But Kansas, like I said earlier, did buy 20, or they sold 2,600 fed cattle on a direct basis on Tuesday. They've already sold 4,750 for the week, but on Tuesday it was 218 to 220, which was steady to $2 higher. Texas even sold 4,000 head from 218 to 219, which is steady to $1 higher there. We did have our market finder, our market maker on fed cattle on Tuesday, Stockman's Livestock Market in Yankton, South Dakota. That 1,100 head in overnight and 1,700 head of fed cattle for their Tuesday fed cattle auction. Brick and mortar sale barn, guys, with competitive bidders in the seats, good quality cattle running in front of them, an auctioneer on the other side, and price discovery somewhere in the middle, guys. Conventional cattle in Yankton sold from 211 to 227.50. That was kind of uneven, from 4.5 lower to up to 7.5 higher there, but awfully good market there. They had pretty decent run of Holstein fed cattle there. They bring 181 to 191. Now the program colored beef cattle there, both non-implanted or drug-free, selling from 221 to 231.50. Wow, wish we could get that on a direct basis, guys, but that was steady to as much as $10 higher. That 231.50 was on 40 head of really fancy fed heifers there. They were half prime, Gary Marks thought, and those heifers brought $12.50 more than their steer mates did 2 weeks ago. That's how much we've been gaining, guys. Your top price, Yankton on the fed cattle market, was on some that went back to feed. It was 62 head of black, drug-free, green, gant, 1,218 pound steers that come in there. They bring 248.50. Wow, big time price there, and a good sale there at Stockman's Livestock Market in Yankton. How about your box beef cutout values? They gained ground on Tuesday. Not a lot on the choice, but quite a bit on select. Choice cuts were up $1.10 at $344.67. Selects were up $4.90 at $332.97. Your slaughter was pretty good. We had a pretty respective Tuesday with 121,000, but up through the first 2 days of the week, 230,000 head estimated cattle slaughter. That's 6,000 more than just last week, but 11,000 less than the same week a year ago. Talk about what else is going on. Charolais, guys, if you're looking to mix up your genetics a little bit, you want to put a little more frame under them, get some cattle that'll grow to these bigger weights. Charolais bulls achieve yield grade premiums while continuing to deliver on quality, and they do all of this with industry acceptance. And that is the key to it, guys, with Charolais. For more information, go to poundsmatter.com. Talk about your feeder cattle market, brought to you by Specialty Risk Insurance. They are working to protect your livelihood. Your real-time index based on an 800-pound cash auction steer, 7-day moving average from 7 to 899 pounds, just like your CME index. After your sales on Tuesday, sitting at 297.04, creeping up a little bit more, up 12 cents. Latest CME cash feeder cattle index all the way back down at 293.78, but it'll be coming up here next time it comes out. Market I've been talking about that's getting here, Farmington Regional Stockyards in Farmington, Missouri is having their sale here today on Wednesday, May the 7th. It's their weanback special. They're looking for 2,000 head now, with a whole lot of them 400 to 550 pound light calves there. Been weaned 45 days and had all their shots. Check them out on DVAuction.com. Let's talk about your big sales on Tuesday. Ozarks Regional Stockyard in West Plains, Missouri had 3,450 head. Good run for them. They're starting to get more yearlings coming in there. 3,450 head through the ring, 445 on their in-house video they do with help from DVAuction there, but it's an active market, guys. The feeders in West Plains bring $4 to $6 higher. Calves were fairly uneven except for the peewee calves, which were $10 to $12 higher. Impressive quote from West Plains, Missouri. This is extreme south central Missouri, guys. They had 68 steers, weighed 813 pounds. That's how good this market is, guys. Check out another market up in the northern plains, Kimball Livestock Exchange in Kimball, South Dakota. They had 4,600 head. No comparison for last week, as they didn't have a big feeder sale last week, but they were your NationalBeefWire stick-out sale of the day. Check out this automated market report and look at your best tested weights there. How about 173 head of 7-weight steers in Kimball? They averaged 747 head with a weighted average price of $325.84. 930 head of the 8-weight steers averaged 869 at $302.52, guys, weighing nearly 870. 1,294 head of the 9-weight steers averaged 958 at $282.49. Look at some heifers. How about 153 head of 6-weight heifers averaged 655 at $316.45. 422 head of the 7-weight heifers averaged 758 at $298.94. 564 head of the 8-weight heifers averaged 852 at $279.55. And 143 head of 9-weight heifers at Kimball Livestock Exchange in Kimball, South Dakota. They averaged 989 pounds with a weighted average price of $239.96. How about Beaver County Stockyards in Beaver, Oklahoma? 3,550 head for their sale, guys. Feeder steers sold $2 to $5 higher. Feeder heifers were unevenly steady. The calves sold steady to $3 higher. But they did have some more of those big feeders right off the wheat, guys, and I was referring to them when I was talking about turning them top quality cattle out on wheat and seeing what they gain, and just gaining their absolute heads off. And they come in there and they're looking good, guys. They sold 104 steers right off the wheat there, weighed 1118 at $264. That's not quite $3,000 for feeders, but it is $2,950, guys. Don't forget, we're going to be having the special Feeder Flash Beaver Clash Graze Out Special next week at Beaver County Stockyards. I'm going to be there on Tuesday, guys. Check them out on DVAuction.com. Some individual quotes from all around. How about Flint Hills Stockyards in St. Mary's, Kansas? They sold 60 steers, weighed 840 at $304 1/4. Bluegrass Stockyards in Lexington, Kentucky. That's the main location there. They sell 85 steer calves, weighed 517 at $432. Put the wheels under those, guys. But the most impressive quote that I saw anywhere on Tuesday in your Macrocin, no BS, top quote for the day, indeed, come out of Kimball Livestock Exchange. It was 64 steers, weighed 908 at $303.50. And that's your Feeder Flash for Wednesday.